stem cells are your body's repair crew. And the way that a stem cell works is that they live in these niches and they're mostly in a state of hibernation. When the right signals are provided to these stem cells in their various homes throughout the body, they will get up out of their niche, they're activated, and they will undergo a process where the body will start to make more of them. When we get older, stem cells will experience something called stem cell exhaustion. And this is where all parts of that process that I just described are not as effective as they were when they're younger. One of the reasons that stem cells don't continue to do their job is because the level of inflammation rises in the body. And what is one of the main drivers of an increase in inflammation in the body? An increase in accumulating burden of senescent cells. We saw a decrease from baseline in males of symptoms of aging by about 30%, and in females it was 42%. So I'm 51 now, and as I've gotten older, I can feel my body not recovering from exercise as I did when I was younger. And now I recover much, much better than I used to.
All right, welcome everybody to the Ageless Future podcast. This is your host today, Cade Archibald, and I'm really excited to introduce our special guest today. Really just can't wait. I've been looking at this on my calendar, really just anxiously waiting to have Dr. Dan Pardi on the show. He's the Chief Health Officer at Qualia Life Sciences. He leads education to advance healthspan and peak performance. So he's the founder of HumanOS.me and the host of HumanOS Radio, the official podcast of the Sleep Research Society. Dan's also advised elite military units, Fortune 500 companies, and startups through his consultancy, Vimvedi Health. He holds a PhD in cognitive neuroscience from Leiden University and Stanford. And he speaks regularly at events like TEDx, VC Firms, and the Institute for Human Machine Cognition. So Dan, welcome to the show. So happy to have you on here.
Cade, thank you for having me on. And likewise, I've been really looking forward to having this time to chat with you. So yeah, it's now it's here.
Yeah, very excited. And so, yeah, I want to kind of kick it off to get a little insight into your story and what got you interested in like neuroscience and kind of that world, and how'd you end up working with Qualia Life Sciences?
Yeah. It's fun to think about that question. Like how are you doing what you do? And thinking back on this myself. So I've always been interested in health. And I think it goes back to when I was in high school, playing sports, got injured, twisted an ankle, and was trying to figure out, how do I get back onto the court? How do I get back onto the field? And that made me think about my relationship with health and the relationship between health and performance from a pretty early age. So in a way, it was almost a blessing that this bad thing happened to me, because it stimulated a career that I find very, very stimulating and interesting. And so my journey is an interesting one because it never fit perfectly into an existing path. So I'll tell you a little bit about some of the things that I did. After school, after college, I went and got a master's in exercise physiology. And in that particular department and group at Florida State, I flew across the country from Northern California to go there because they were the only school in the country that was doing exercise physiology and sports nutrition. And I was interested in both. And my favorite professor there, James Overton, was somebody who was actually focusing a lot on the brain. In fact, he ended up branching off and creating a neuroscience department at Florida State a couple of years after I left. But it was very present in the teachings from him in my classes. And so from there, I went on and I did cancer research, looking at how lifestyle influences the development of prostate cancer in people who had recently been diagnosed. This is through the Preventative Medicine Research Institute affiliated with UCSF. Then I went into working bioinformatics. So a part of a company called Double Twist. They were looking to be the first group to sequence the human genome. We were competitive with Craig Ventnor's Celera, and then also NCBI. So it was a fun, cool time. And then I went to work in the pharmaceutical industry for a company called Orphan Medical, which was then quickly acquired by Jazz Pharmaceuticals out of Palo Alto. And they had a drug for narcolepsy, a neurological disorder that causes sleep issues. And so I knew nothing about sleep. I knew nothing about that condition or even the medication, but I quickly became very interested in all of them. And that I ended up leading the medical affairs department, or heading it up and growing that to about almost 30 people. And we did a variety of really interesting things. So creating, after a drug gets approved, education. So you see a little bit of a theme there. How do you help an educated audience like physicians understand better about the condition and also about the mechanisms of the medication? And then eventually that led to me having my own questions that I wanted to address. So I did pursue a PhD. And it was this really cool combo of working with this great group out of the Netherlands. I was the head of diabetes at the hospital, and this very prestigious neurologist who was one of the best people in the world at diagnosing hard cases of narcolepsy. And then two people at Stanford, so Jed Black and Jamie Zeitzer. Jed Black was the second ever director of the Stanford Sleep Clinic, the first sleep clinic in the world. And then Jamie Zeitzer, who is a circadian biologist who worked with Charles Eisler out of Harvard, is really, really smart guy, and just such a collaborative, supportive group. I felt very, very lucky. But even though I was doing sleep research, I knew I didn't want to become a sleep researcher. I wanted to, this was me trying to find my track, right? I was really interested in everything that supports human health. So I didn't want to necessarily become a specialist. I wanted to become an expert generalist, if you will. Like, how do you know all the different factors that matter for health, including behavior? And so I ended up working on a behavior model that I then presented at Stanford Medicine X and Health 2.0. And it was this model, a behavior model can describe or predict or explain why behavior changes. And you can actually use it as a model to then try to affect behavior change. So I created that, and then ended up creating HumanOS, which is a reflection of that model. And I did that for many years. And then eventually I was acquired by Restore Hyper Wellness, and I became their chief health officer early in 2021. Worked there for a while, and then now the chief health officer for Qualia Life Sciences. So my interest is, like I said, it is in every single thing that matters to support our health. And now have a lot of focus on healthspan. So how do we sustain a higher level of health longer and deeper into the lifespan?
Yeah, I love that. Well, and at Qualia, it seems like they're coming out with some pretty fascinating products that are kind of going towards that direction. Obviously, I think what I hear Qualia, I always think about the kind of the nootropic product that I always saw, and I think it's great. I've tested it, used it, and had great success. But now you guys have this kind of going more on that health span as opposed to just the cognitive piece. So it seems like you're adding a little more dynamics to the overall product field, or the different product offerings. So really fascinating. How's so how's things going at Qualia? Tell me a little bit about what you guys are working on there.
Yeah. I'm glad that you brought up our nootropic. That product was the origin of the company. So the founders, James and Daniel Smachtenberger, and some others as well, they spent 2 years formulating, and they're really like no other people that I've seen or met in the space. And I actually met them very early on. So way they talk about how they were approaching creating a formula is, how do you support a system trying to accomplish a particular task? So very much respecting this innate wisdom of the body and instead of trying to override it with, like, let's say, one or two interesting compounds and giving a high dose of that. Rather, how do we then, I'll explain the approach of the nootropic because you'll see how it applies to everything else that we do now. But in that particular arena for the product Qualia Mind, what are different amino acids, for instance, that support the production of neurotransmitters? What kind of phytochemicals or nutrients actually will help keep the neurotransmitter in the synapse longer, or reduce inflammation and oxidative stress from neurons working hard and thinking? How do you support blood flow to the brain? Now, what you see is that you have all of these different compounds working together to support the system as a whole, instead of, let's say, just one interesting compound. That approach led to the development of a product that when I tried it, I thought it was clearly the best nootropic in the space from my experience. And when I spoke with other people about that, they felt the same. And so it showed up and I'll explain the effects. Like, when I take it, I don't feel overstimulated. I feel a lucidity, a clarity. That clarity lasts all day. It doesn't, you don't have like a come down with coffee where you feel like a coffee crash. Not only that, but it didn't prevent me from sleeping at night. I slept great. And then when I did, you don't take it on the weekend. So it's 5 days on, you take 2 days off. And on the weekends, I didn't feel desaturated, tired, brain dead. The opposite. Even though I wasn't taking it that day, I felt probably more uplifted on those days than I would if I wasn't taking it at all. And so the idea of a nootropic is not only that it supports cognitive performance, but it also is making the brain healthier. And that idea was reflected in this experience of not feeling like you're just taxing the brain, working on it really hard. Like, some cognitive enhancers can do that, right? But then they do leave you feeling depleted. That is the origin of the formulation approach from this company. And so then back in 2024, I met with James Schmachtenberger. We've stayed in touch for years. And he said, hey, we've grown a lot and we're looking for somebody who can help communicate the science. And we love your work at HumanOS. Let's chat. And so we had coffee, and then that led to me coming in as the chief health officer. So the company's not only about making really innovative formulations in the spirit of what I just described, but also then communicating the science of the therapeutic area, and also how the formulations work and why we're excited about them. So that is the nature of my job. It feels like a really perfect fit.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, and so what are some of the new products that like I see a lot of, not a ton, but there's like a few new things that looks like are popping up. So I'd love to kind of hear about those and what's some of the science behind like this stem cell product you have and everything there.
Sure. Yeah, I'll just do a quick overview of just a few of the products. But a few years ago, the company took a chance and said, we think that clearing out senescent cells, or cells that are partially dead, but they stay alive and emit a lot of inflammatory substances into the surrounding, and they contribute to an elevation in inflammation in the body. Well, there was science now that was coming out looking at natural compounds like a variety of different flavonoids that could target specific aspects of senescent cells. So senescent cells will upregulate their survival pathways, and that helps them stay alive, even though we want to clear them once they formed. And so the way that it typically works is that when a senescent cell, it's like, instead of going through apoptosis or cell death, they're partially dying, and they release all of those compounds into the space. That is meant to signal to the immune system, hey, come clear me out. But what do we know happens when you get older? Well, your immune system isn't as effective. So now you have a lot of these cells around the body that are these beacons saying, hey, come clear me out, but the immune system isn't strong enough to go do that. And so you see a general elevation in inflammation in the body. And so our science team said, hey, we know the science of what's being tested right now as a senolytic, a senescence killing compound. And we think that it's really exciting and can fit into the nutraceutical space. And we created that product, and we were worried. We're like, I don't know if there's going to be much of a market for it. I don't know how many people have heard of senescent cells. but we should make it because it would be good for there to be a product like this in the market. And it went gangbusters. So it really showed us how interested people are in this idea of healthspan. And I found that myself, that it really resonates as people are getting a little bit older and starting to feel some of the effects of the aging process on them and in their lives, whether it's an achy joint, decline in energy, wrinkling skin, gray hair, all of it, that they were interested in finding solutions on how to mitigate that process in some sort of positive way. And so it was a very clear sign for us that this is a good place for us to be. We can create really valuable solutions, and there's a market for people that are like, yeah, I want this. Perfect union. And so following on the heels of that, we created an NAD product, which is, of course, supporting something that supports energy creation throughout the body. We have a tremendous amount of NAD molecules in every cell, and they are a part of every single metabolic reaction in the body, whether it's building up proteins or breaking down nutrients for fuel. NAD is a part of that, and you see a precipitous decline by middle age. You might have 50% of those NAD molecules as you did before. And so that was another parallel topic that was gaining popularity. And we said, all right, how do we make a better product there? And so what's interesting about that is not only do you see the NAD levels decline, but one of the reasons why is because it's getting consumed a lot. Like other parts of the aging process are consuming NAD. And so we're, again, trying to support that entire system, not only providing precursors that help your body make more NAD, but also then working on the factors that are draining the demand side of NAD production to try to keep those levels up. That was another product. And then just about a month ago, we released our Qualia stem cell product, which I know we're going to talk about today. But, the bottom line is all of these products can work harmoniously and synergistically. That's what we think. Because these hallmarks of aging, these reliable signs that you can see in a body that is getting older, there will not be one product that solves all of it. But rather, if you can target these different hallmarks of aging, then you actually can do better with a combination of approach. That is our philosophy now. That is our approach to things. So we want to make unique individual products that do something really well, but we really see the magic is laying across all the different products working together.
Yeah. Yeah, fascinating. And I think, the senolytics, if you asked me, I don't know, probably 4 or 5 years ago, I probably wouldn't have been able to really tell you there's much of a pulse on that at all. And even now, I'm surprised at how well that did just by adding that in, because there's still lots of times where people are very unaware of senolytics and those senescent cells. And so fascinating. I think you guys taking a jump on that was awesome, because it is a very super beneficial product, and it's something that there's not a lot of options out there. It's awesome. So I'm excited to learn more about this stem cell product and kind of what the mechanisms are that you guys are seeing from your research and your science, because we do a lot of stuff with stem cell infusions and rejuvenation treatments with our clients. More like we'll get actual stem cells and inject them, and so we're always looking for different products, as well as different treatments that can really activate stem cells in the body and create more and more healing. And so, excited to just dive in a little deeper on that particular product. So maybe I'm curious, how was it discovered, or what's kind of the story back there? I love listening to the stories of how things are discovered.
Yeah. Yes. So maybe what I'll do is, I know that you've covered the subject of stem cells because of the work that you're doing in your clinic. I've heard some of your podcasts. You guys do a really great job. It's one of the reasons I was so excited to chat today because, like I said, I think that there's something very complementary here. But would it be helpful for just do like a basic overview of stem cells if someone's a first time
Yeah.
listener? On that?
Especially, we'll have new listeners that maybe haven't dove that deep into that as well.
Yeah, yeah, and I'll be efficient with it. But basically, stem cells are your body's repair crew. And the way that a stem cell works is that they live in these niches and they're mostly in a state of hibernation. But when the right signals are provided to these stem cells in their various homes throughout the body, they will get up out of their niche, they're activated, and they will undergo a process where the body will start to make more of them. And in that division process, one stem cell will make a clone of itself so that that stem cell, the next one, the daughter stem cell, can make a clone of itself and another type of cell called a progenitor cell. The progenitor cells are the cells that are destined to become a specific type of tissue in the body. And I'll explain the life cycle of how that works. So they're, like I said, they're mostly in hibernation, and that's really important for their health. In fact, this is one of the reasons why some people call them forever cells, because they're some of the longest lived cells in the body. In fact, there's an interesting stories and anecdotes where you take stem cells out of a host and the stem cells in their petri dish outlive the host. The host dies eventually and the stem cells are still alive. And there are some specific reasons for that, some unique characteristics of stem cells. They do a very good job maintaining protein balance internally. So because they're in hibernation, their metabolic rate is very, very low. So they have very low protein turnover rates. And they also do a very good job using chaperone proteins to then help make sure that the quality control of any proteins that they do make is pristine and like multifold better than any other cell in the body. So imagine a protein like a key that needs to fit into a lock. It has to be in a very specific conformation. And if it gets broken down, which all proteins do over time, then it can't be effective. That key is not going to fit in the lock. It's not going to do its job. So the chaperone proteins magnetically adhere to parts of the protein that get off, and then it can either put it back together so it is functional, or if it's broken down enough, it'll actually tag it and label it for cleaning, right? So autophagy. And these cells also will aggressively clean out any broken down proteins. So that's one of the reasons why they can stay alive for so long. Low metabolism, and they maintain the proteins really, really, really well. So that's some unique characteristics about them and why they live so long. But then they get into the body and they have to go do their job. And their job is to hear where in the body needs to be fixed. And they will then go through a process of mobilization, getting into the circulation where they're listening for signals. And once they get near some tissue, as they're circulating through the circulatory system, they will adhere to nearby to where a tissue needs to get some sort of replacement. And then they'll migrate into that niche. And then they're going to listen for signals in that niche, in that area. And then they're going to start a very slow, several week process of what we call differentiation, where the stem cell is now turning into a functional tissue, something that's going to line your gut, or a muscle cell, or a blood cell. And all of that orchestration is a part of stem cell health. And so we know when we get older, stem cells will experience something called stem cell exhaustion. And this is where all parts of that process that I just described are not as effective as they were when they're younger. And things happen in kind of a strange way, actually. Like, for example, I'll give you one example. I'll give you two. So there's basically changes in the resting state, right? I was saying that they have to be in hibernation. You want to maintain that stem cell pool. Well, one thing that happens during aging is that they're too deeply asleep. And so the normal signals that would cause them to wake up and go be functional, they're not hearing them. Wow. But that's not the only thing that happened. The other thing that can happen is the exact opposite. So they can be sleeping too shallow, which causes them to activate too easily, and then that burns out your pool. So you can see that there's like a Goldilocks principle happening here with stem cells. And with aging, it can push it to either side off of that balance.
Yeah.
And so that's like, it's not as simplistic as like, oh, we just lose stem cells. There's a variety of different ways in which they are not being they're not as effective as they once were.
Yeah, I love the Goldilocks principle where, yeah, we if you're someone that's a hard charger that's just put a lot of pressure and stress on your body over time, that stuff adds up. Same
Yeah.
time, you're super, it's kind of like life. If you're super, dormant and you don't do a lot, you don't move a lot, those later on years, there's usually health consequences there as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I bet for a lot of your audience, they know exercise and movement is incredibly good for them. But if they're dealing with an injury, something that's now not healing very well, it's hard to move. It's hard to go for a walk if your ankle is barking at you, your knee hurts. And so for a lot of people that are less active than what is ideal, the reason for that is not laziness. The reason for that is pain. There's some issue that's going on that's getting them off of their own health plan. And so this is, I think, one of the reasons why I find this so exciting is like we think we can be a part of overall solutions that help people stay active. People know that they need to be active. And so particularly for people in our audience that are listening and hearing what we're talking about, this is just about making your body feel better so you can keep charging.
Yeah, love that. So, yeah, so we talked a little bit about the stem cells. So, with what's like, where did you guys kind of start, or what made you? I know there's some really really interesting ingredients. Like I'm just looking in the kind of
Yeah.
what's in this product. I'm just really curious how you guys kind of discovered that and went in that direction.
Yeah. Yeah. We talk about hallmarks of aging distinctly, talk about stem cell exhaustion. It's a nice way to carve out some aspect of a bigger, more complicated process and talk about just that. But once you study these, you see the interrelationship between all of them. So I'll give you an example. One of the reasons that stem cells don't continue to do their job is because the level of inflammation rises in the body. And what is one of the main drivers of an increase in inflammation in the body? An increase in accumulating burden of senescent cells. So coming off the heels of creating a senolytic product that's meant to clear out those cells that are driving inflammation, we're like, oh, this is actually a nice handshake with this other product that's now going to, or with another area that we could potentially target that could help with regeneration. The bigger topic of like, how do we help to replace tissues so that we continue to feel young? And so the science team, a group of PhDs, they do a tremendous amount of work and screened over 50 products, natural compounds that have preclinical or clinical evidence that look at some aspect of, we'll call it the stem cell journey, and will either help the cells wake up, get out of their niche, wake them up out of their hibernation state, get them into circulation, or help them find the tissue that they need to go to, or have clear differentiation signals, or help to protect them in some ways. And so we winnowed that list down to 15 different compounds. And this is where the art of formulation comes in, where you now have to sit in a room with really learned people on this particular topic and say, okay, how can we support this system in a way that leads to the overall goal of better repair and regeneration? And that's what the team had formulated. And so, yeah, I'll give you like a couple of examples. So we have one of the reasons why stem cells, since I mentioned this one so far, right? Since there are changes in the resting state, one of the reasons for that is a drop in glutathione levels in cells. And that then interferes with, it gets that cell out of that Goldilocks zone, right? And they can either be too arousable or too deep. And either way, that's bad. Either you're burning out your stem cells or you can't get them up. And either way, that's not effective. And so when you can increase glutathione in a cell, then that actually helps the cell be more resilient and stronger and can have better acuity to the signals it would naturally hear to then go into circulation and do its work. And so, for example, we have a couple of ingredients like ferulic acid or Salvia militarized extract or sea buckthorn. All of those different all of those different ingredients in the formula are rich in phenolic or polyphenolic compounds that will we know that these can do a variety of things, that they can stimulate glutathione levels, and they also can act directly on the master regulator of inflammation in cells, which is called nuclear factor kappa beta. And that master regulator of inflammation gets bound up by phenolics. This is why we know like the Mediterranean diet with high polyphenolic olive oil is really, really good for health and longevity. But what they'll do is they'll bind that master regulator of inflammation and prevent it from translocating into the nucleus where it can create inflammatory molecules like TNF alpha or interleukin 1 beta or interleukin 6, these things that you can measure then ultimately in the blood and say, okay, yeah, your levels of inflammation are higher than they should be. And so here's just an example of how a couple of ingredients are targeting just a couple aspects that then make this whole system healthier.
Yeah, fascinating. Well, yeah, and there's a lot of buzz out there right now, like buckthorn for stem cells and some of that, but I haven't. That's actually really fascinating around how you're tracing it back to that glutathione production and not it just like creating less excitable or less active stem cells or the
Yeah.
not that ideal stem cell that we're needing. So very, very cool. And I love how you're using you guys' kind of framework around figuring these out was around the hallmarks of aging.
Yeah.
That's a kind of a concept that we really follow and try to adhere to. And so I love that.
Great.
So,
And I'll say this if you don't mind, Cade, but
yeah,
that's just one little important component. But overall, we're looking at ways to how do you mobilize the stem cells, getting them activated and doing it in the right way. How do you protect them? Sometimes during, let's say, the differentiation process, as you get older, the stem cell that is trying to become, let's say, a new muscle cell, it's not strong enough and it dies in the middle of the process where it's trying to now become something that is going to help you. And so that's another aspect of what we're trying to do. And so it's the complicated part when you're talking about this is that it's not as though, even though there's 15 different ingredients, each ingredient more often than not is doing more than one thing and the overall goal. But for anybody who is ever going to get some stem cell therapy, you're going to be spending money to do something that could be very, very healthy. Wouldn't you want to optimize stem cell health so that procedure has the best chance of maximizing the benefits from the injected stem cells? So that's like, instead of thinking of, because that's how a lot of people think of stem cells, right? You get a medical therapy where you get them extracted from the body from MSCs or hematopoietic from bone marrow, and then concentrate them, put them back into the body in an area that needs some support. And through complicated mechanisms, whether it's microRNAs, exosomes, the actual stem cells, there's all different ways in which it's working, but it can help a person feel a lot better and regain function. But wouldn't you, if I was, and I probably will get some stem cell therapy in an Achilles soon, I would start Qualia stem cell the day I'm getting my procedure done, because I want to do everything I can to then support the health of those stem cells that are getting injected.
yeah. Well, and it's really cool because in the past we've recommended at least three or four of the different, ingredients in this formulation with the Qualia stem cell.
Hmm.
It's really cool to see them all in the kind of packaged up, as well as a lot of other ingredients. I think it's 15 total, right? There's like
Yeah.
very specific, precise things that are creating these activations to just help support your stem cells. So if you think
Yeah.
about like for any listeners that have had stem cells, it's something to really highly consider. Like you get shoulder injection, and then let's continue to just heal and just support those stem cells. I think it's brilliant. So I'm curious, any other like cool stories of clients or customers that have used this that you guys have?
Well, I'll say this, that my what I'm most interested in now, as I was alluding to earlier, is the combination of the different products together. So we have a health span protocol, which you takes our senolytic product, and by the way, that product you take 2 days out of a month, and then you wait a month, you take it again. So in my calendar, the first weekend of every month, I take senolytic. And the idea there is to then keep knocking back the senescent cells that you're making. And because you're in midlife, your immune system is not as strong as it was. This is going to support that process of clearing them out. So you'd imagine if you do cause those senescent cells to die, your inflammation is probably going to go up for a day or two. And so then you take 2 days of senolytic, you wait, and then you do 4 days of stem cell. Our stem cell product is not every day. You do it just like senolytic, you do it once a month, but in this case, it's 4 days in a row. And why is that? Because there are products out there that are trying to get you to release and stimulate stem cells constantly. One of the characteristics of stem cell exhaustion is their overstimulation. So you want to give it a pulse, then you want to get out, and then let them go back into their hibernation state so that you don't exhaust them too early. You don't want to do that. So we're very thoughtful about the timing of products, not only when you might take two together or even more, but how you do it and in what sequence. And to give you another example of that, with NAD, that's adding cellular energy. Well, we don't take that product with the day before and the 2 days that you're taking Qualia senolytic. Why? We don't want to give those senescent cells a lifeline, make them more resilient and stronger, right? So we don't take it on those days. And I fast the night before, I protein fast in the morning, right? You want to not help those cells survive, but you want to knock them while they're down. And then a few days later, you go back on Qualia NAD and then start your stem cells for 4 days. And then basically for the rest of the month, I'm taking Qualia NAD. It's probably one of my favorite products because it really is energizing. And what I've noticed more about Qualia NAD is something that I was a very sensitive marker that I was acutely aware of is I'm 51 now. And as I've gotten older, I can feel my body not recovering from exercise as I did when I was younger. And now I recover much, much better than I used to. And I didn't know what to look for, but I noticed it. And I'd been monitoring this for years, trying different solutions, trying all sorts of different things. And this was a very clear effect for me. So that's kind of part answer to your question. I'm really excited about that combo. But yeah, one thing that I'm also proud of for the company is that we do research on all of our products. So we won a Science and Innovation Award from the Nutrition Business Journal because every single product that we put out there, we do clinical trials. So I'll give you an example. For our Qualia NAD product, we've done 4 clinical trials. So we start with something that's more like a survey to say, okay, what do they say? Do they feel it? What do they report? We publish that on the website. And then we'll do, let's say, like a single blind study, something that's more sophisticated. And with that particular product, it's been in the market long enough where we've now done multiple double-blind placebo-controlled trials on that product, showing that we not only can increase levels of NAD in a measurement in the blood and whole blood, but also that there's also clinical outcomes to that. So people feel more energetic. There's all sorts of things that people will report. And so similarly, even though this product is new for Qualia stem cell, we've done some cool research on that too. So we've done a pilot study where it was basically almost 30 men and women between 40 and 70. And the idea is that we give them a baseline questionnaire at day 0. Then they do 4 days of the stem cell product. And then we do another interim questionnaire at day 5. And then the final questionnaire at day 11. And we look at symptoms of aging. And so we saw, even in that 4-day period, which honestly exceeded my expectations, we saw a decrease from baseline in males of symptoms of aging by about 30%. And in females, it was 42%. So that was very impressive. And kind of across the board for like a sub-scale of that, healing and well-being, around approximately 30% improvements in things like energy and well-being, or improvements in joint and muscle function, or mental focus and clarity. So I would personally expect to see what's that?
Go ahead. I have a follow up on that.
Yeah, I was thinking, people probably need to do 3 months of this before they start to feel that. But this was reported right away after taking it, even just for 4 days.
Wow, that's very fascinating. What's the sample size? Like how many people were participating?
In this case, it was 29 people total. It was, about 15 male and women, men and women. Yeah.
Oh, that's a great kind of way. I'm just love understanding how some of those studies were done, and so similar process with like you've done that with all your products. So you did that with NAD as well as the let's see, did you do that with the senolytics as well?
Yep. We research all of them and do kind of a similar approach. So we'll start with like a pilot study that is doing questionnaires and getting self-reports, and then we'll follow up with something more sophisticated. So for example, with the stem cell, we did a metabolomic O-link study. And in this case, we're looking at cytokine signatures after 4 days of usage. And so in this case, it was, all right, so take it for 4 days. And this was we had 2 case reports. So one was a 67-year-old male. And basically the results were, it's hard to know, like, all right, well, you're now looking how multiple things are changing. So we looked at 48 different cytokine or protein biomarkers, and they were, if you look at the constellation of those changes, it was reflective of a product that was helping to produce mobilization, homing, and then to help stabilize those. It was all physiologically consistent with like regeneration activity. And I think getting both physiologic insight through a study like this, but also qualitative, subjective, how do you feel? That's what you want to get both.
Yeah, well, that's what makes it really, really fascinating. Almost answers some questions on why someone could be feeling, because in medicine, a lot, especially in drug trials, the placebo group, there's like placebo is a real thing, but I also believe a lot of it has to do with energy and what's happening. So if you're seeing physiological changes, sometimes people actually won't feel better, but if you see the physiological changes, it's like, oh, actually, like something's changing. And because maybe I just feel amazing all the time, and if I'm taking something, I don't really notice that much, but if I can see something physiologically, it feels great. Or, sometimes not feeling that great, and this thing helps me feel better. And so if you can kind of have both sides of that coin, it's awesome. I'd love to hear. So there was 48 different biomarkers that you were measuring for. That was on the stem cell.
Yeah.
Product. Very cool. And they were like what's some of the markers you were using to look at that? I'm just very, very curious here.
Yeah. So we were looking at, so for example, like enhanced tissue homing. So the term homing is means that can a stem cell circulating find where it needs to go. So we were looking at something called CXCL12. That is that's a factor that helps the stem cells find where they need to go. Then, the
That's
sort of,
that's cytokine CXCL12
yeah, L12, yeah.
or L12.
Um, and then we're looking at like how to normalizing these growth factor signals. It's not quite as clear as like shutting down the immune system. It's complicated and it depends on part of the process. So at times you want to have an immune system, like the signals would be of sort of upregulated immune molecules is important as a driver in the health of a stem cell. And so, for example, we were looking at something called HGF and FLT3LG. Those are growth factor signals that you're going to see from cytokines. Again, all of those are going to be indicative of some part of a process that would be reflective of a regeneration phenotype. So it's hard to make. I mean, this you're asking. These questions that we're all asking now are interesting because we are at a place where we can generate an incredible amount of information through omics. So you can create an entire signature. You can look at hundreds of molecules and instead of just one, right? And what is the signature of that panoply of all these molecules indicating? And that is where we're going to see things like AI be able to give us the answers and say, okay, we're going to put all of these into an AI algorithm. And it's going to say, yes, this is looking like you are promoting the regenerative process, right? It's not just this one molecule up and down, but how they're corresponding.
There's just so many ebbs and flows and different things that go up and down that actually what's happening. So I love that. Super fascinating. On just how you guys are quantifying and seeing those results. That's amazing. Well done.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun to be at like really the cutting edge of understand. I mean, I think what's happening is we have all this innovation that's taking place, and it's outpacing our ability to validate it because validation is a very slow process. It takes a long time, replication. Sure. And of course, it's important. We want to see that something does happen in more than one person or more than one study. And so science takes a lot of time. But I think we're now at the precipice of AI being able to, in silico, so running models that are as predictive as human-based clinical trials. You can have, let's say, a dramatically lower sample size, and you can generate predictive information from that signature. And so there are labs like Michael Snyder at Stanford and others that are doing this really cool work. James Yurkovic, who's at the Buck Institute. We recently became friends, and I love the work he's doing there. And so it's a cool time, but you're going to see some tension between what's been codified as like standard processes and also what's like cutting edge and new, and it's going to completely outpace what gets implemented in clinical practice in the standard model.
Well, awesome. Well, Dan, it has been a pleasure. I really appreciate you coming on the show, and man, just amazing knowledge and super fascinating and exciting to see what innovations and everything you guys have created. And Dan and his team were kind enough to give the Ageless Future audience an extra 15% off on Qualia orders. So if you go to qualialife.com/Ageless Future, you guys take a look at that. Go try some of it out. It's awesome. But Dan, for you, what's if someone wants to connect with you or even just follow you, what's the best way to kind of stay connected?
Yeah. So, at the moment, I'm doing a lot of podcasts. So really evangelizing around why we think this stuff is so interesting. But on the health science team that I lead at Qualia, we're also working on a lot of blog articles that are very well done. So, for example, we'll take one ingredient in one of our formulations and we'll do more of a deep dive into that. And it's hard to communicate all this information. We'd be on the call for 8 hours. But what I recommend is following that work. And I think that one of the ways to be healthy is to try not to get overwhelmed, but see if you can stay connected to a line of research that you're interested in. So if you're interested in stem cells, come and read about them, make a little time for it in your week, see what different people are doing. And then, this general healthspan protocol, basically, you'd be taking this product once a month. And you do that in perpetuity. And then, of course, if you're getting some sort of procedure with stem cells and you want to maximize your investment, you would do the product around then as well. But that's what I would say about where to follow our work. And it's been really great to chat with you, Cade.
It's incredible. Well, we wish you the very best, and I'm excited. I got some here. Sorry, my virtual background doesn't want to cooperate with me. But I love the packaging and everything. So I'm excited. I actually just did my first dose last night. So excited to, or I guess it was yesterday morning. But yes, I'm excited about it. So
okay,
looking forward to staying connected with you, and for listeners out there, go check out Dan and some of his work. And if you want to try it, go try some Qualia, and use the Ageless Future discount code. So thanks so much. We'll see everybody next time on the Ageless Future show.
Thanks so much, Cade.